My name is Alara, and I'm 28 years old. For the past decade, my entire world has revolved around the sizzle of a hot pan, the scent of fresh herbs, and the art of turning simple ingredients into something that can make a person's day. I'm a chef. Not a famous one, not yet anyway, but a damn good one. Last month, I was supposed to have the happiest day of my life, marrying the man who saw the artist in me when everyone else just saw a girl with a messy apron. But just days before the wedding, my own parents tried to sabotage the most important part of it, the food. They called my venue, canceled my catering, and tried to replace my dream menu with their own bland version of what my life should be. They thought they had finally won, finally forced me into the box they'd built for me since childhood. What they didn't know was that my mentor, the world-renowned chef Julian Vance, was about to serve them a dish of public humiliation so cold it would burn. If you've ever had to fight for your dream against the very people who should have been your biggest fans, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And before I tell you how this 5-star disaster unfolded, please hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to hear more stories about how the most unexpected people can help you reclaim your own narrative. Before all this, my life was a quiet simmer of hard work and gentle hope. I was a line cook at a high-end Italian restaurant in the city, working grueling 60-hour weeks. The pay was just enough to cover the rent on my tiny studio apartment and my ever-growing collection of cookbooks. It was a life of calloused hands, the constant smell of garlic on my clothes, and the deep, bone-weary exhaustion that comes from being on your feet for 12 hours straight. But I loved it. In the controlled chaos of the kitchen, I found my peace. My fiancé, Liam, a kind-hearted architect who built worlds with lines and numbers, was my sanctuary outside of it. He understood that my passion wasn't just a job. It was the very language my soul spoke. My relationship with my parents, Richard and Helen, was complicated. To them, my brother, Mark, was the sun, and I was a distant, slightly disappointing moon. Mark was 2 years older, a corporate lawyer with a sharp suit, a sharper haircut, and a 6-figure salary. He was their masterpiece, the living embodiment of their ambitions. He had followed their pre-approved life script to the letter. Prestigious university, law school, a job at a top-tier firm. They had financed every step of his journey without a second thought. His law school tuition, a casual expense they boasted about at their country club. I, on the other hand, had always been a source of quiet confusion for them. My dream wasn't of corner offices and stock options, but of farmers' markets and the perfect crème brûlée. When I announced I wanted to go to culinary school, you would have thought I'd told them I was joining the circus. I still remember the conversation in their sterile white living room. My father, Richard, had taken off his glasses and polished them slowly, a sure sign a lecture was coming. "Alara," he began, his voice laced with that familiar tone of weary disappointment. "A cook? It's a noble profession for some, I suppose, but it's not stable. It's not a career. It's a hobby." My mother, Helen, had chimed in, her voice softer but no less cutting. "Sweetheart, we just want you to be secure. Think of the long hours, the low pay. Your brother has a 401 kelvins and a clear path to partner. What will you have? Greasy hands and debt?" When I asked for a small loan to help with the tuition, a fraction of what they had spent on Mark's education, they flatly refused. "We will not finance an irresponsible dream," my father had declared. That was the first time I truly understood where I stood. Their support was not a given. It was an investment, and I was deemed a poor one. So I did it myself. I worked 3 jobs: waitressing, bartending, and an early morning shift at a bakery for 2 years, saving every penny. I enrolled in night classes at the local culinary institute, often studying on the bus between shifts, my body aching but my spirit on fire. The day I graduated, I invited them to the small ceremony. They didn't come. Mark, they explained over the phone, had just closed a big deal and they were taking him out for a celebratory dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The irony was so thick I could have sliced it with a palette knife. This pattern became the background music of my life. When Mark got married, they threw him a wedding that cost more than my annual salary, flying in guests and hiring the most expensive event planner in the state. When I won my first regional cooking competition, a victory that meant the world to me and got my name in a local food blog, I called to share the news. My mother's response was, "Oh, that's nice, dear. By the way, your brother just made senior associate. We're so proud." It was as if my achievements were measured on a different, lesser scale. My successes were nice, his were milestones. My passion was a hobby, his career was a legacy. Liam was the one who helped me see it, not as a personal failing, but as their limitation. "They don't see you, Alara," he would say, holding my hands after a particularly dismissive phone call with my parents. "They only see the reflection of their own ambitions. Your light is too different for them to comprehend." He was right. They loved me, I think, in their own way, but they didn't respect me. And in their world, respect was reserved for those who mirrored their own values of wealth, status, and conventional success. I tried to bridge the gap. I would cook elaborate meals for family dinners, hoping my food could speak for me, hoping they would taste the love and dedication in every bite. They would eat, compliment it politely. "This is quite good, Alara," and then immediately turn the conversation back to Mark's latest courtroom victory or his new German car. It was a slow, painful erosion of hope. I learned to expect less, to shield my heart from the inevitable sting of their indifference. I poured all of my energy into my craft and my relationship with Liam, creating a small, warm world for myself where my worth wasn't up for debate. I had foolishly believed that my wedding, my commitment to a man as wonderful as Liam, would be the one event so universally significant that they would have to finally set aside their preconceived notions and just be happy for me. I thought it would be a ceasefire in a war I never wanted to fight. But I was about to learn that for them, my wedding wasn't a celebration. It was just another opportunity to rewrite my life into a story they found more palatable. The night Liam proposed was perfect. He had taken me to the small, hidden rooftop garden of our apartment building, a place we discovered together. Under a canopy of fairy lights, with the city humming below us, he got down on one knee. He didn't talk about forever or soulmates. He talked about partnership. He spoke of wanting to be the person who tasted every new recipe, who helped me chop vegetables after a long day, who would be my biggest champion as I built my dream, brick by brick. His words were a balm on the old wounds of inadequacy my family had inflicted. Of course, I said yes. We called his family first. His parents were overjoyed. His sisters screamed with delight, and they immediately began planning a celebratory engagement dinner. Their warmth was effortless and genuine. Then, with a deep breath, I called my parents. I put the phone on speaker so Liam could be part of the moment. "We have some news," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Liam and I are engaged." There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough for the silence to feel heavy. Finally, my mother's voice came through, thin and controlled. "Oh, well, that's sudden." "We've been together for 4 years, Helen," Liam interjected gently. "Yes, of course," my father's voice boomed, taking over. "Congratulations. We assume you have a plan. A wedding of this nature requires significant financial planning. Not when's the date, or tell us about the ring." Their first thought was a pragmatic, almost cold assessment of the cost. The joy in the air deflated like a failed souffle. I explained that we wanted something small, intimate, and meaningful. A gathering of about 75 of our closest friends and family at a rustic barn venue we had fallen in love with just outside the city. We were planning to pay for it ourselves. A point of pride for both of us. A barn? My mother repeated, the word dripping with disdain. Ilara, what will people think? Mark had his reception at the Crestwood Country Club. It was elegant. This sounds so provincial. That was the moment the battle lines were drawn. For us, the wedding was about celebrating our love in a way that felt authentic. For them, it was a social performance, a reflection of their status. And a barn wedding for the chef daughter simply didn't fit the brand they had so carefully cultivated through their lawyer son. The most important element of the wedding for me, naturally, was the food. This was my chance to share my heart on a plate with everyone I loved. I told them my plan. I would design the entire menu myself. A farm-to-table feast showcasing local, seasonal ingredients. I would spend the months leading up to the wedding perfecting every dish. My friends from the culinary world had already offered to help me execute it on the day. It was ambitious, but it was my ultimate expression of love and gratitude. Then, I made the mistake of sharing my wildest dream. And in a perfect world, I said, trying to inject some lightness back into the conversation, I'd have Chef Julian Vance cater it. He's my hero. Julian Vance was a culinary legend, a James Beard Award winner famous for his innovative approach to classic French cuisine and his notoriously long waiting list. Mentioning his name was like an amateur painter wistfully wishing for a lesson from Monet. My father let out a short, sharp laugh. Let's be realistic, Alara. You're a line cook. Julian Vance serves presidents and movie stars. Stick to what's achievable. His words were meant to put me in my place, to remind me of the vast gulf between my reality and my aspirations. But as Liam squeezed my hand, a spark of defiance ignited within me. My father's condescension didn't extinguish my dream. It poured gasoline on it. What if it wasn't impossible? What if I could find a way to bridge that gulf, not just for my wedding, but for my life? They saw my dream as a joke, a flight of fancy. They had no idea that I was about to turn that joke into the centerpiece of my new life, and in doing so, expose the hollowness of their own. The storm was coming, and I had just decided to stop looking for shelter and instead learn how to dance in the rain. In the weeks following our engagement announcement, my parents' attempts to control our wedding escalated from subtle suggestions to outright demands. It was as if our desire for a small, personal celebration was a direct insult to them. Their campaign to reshape our wedding into a sequel of my brother's began with the guest list. One Tuesday evening, my mother called me, her voice buzzing with an unnerving efficiency. Alara, I need your fiancé's parents' address, she said, without so much as a hello. Your father and I have drafted the invitation list, and we need to coordinate with them before sending it to the printer. Drafted the list? I asked, confused. Mom, we already have our guest list. It's 75 people, just our closest friends and family. Don't be silly, she scoffed. 75 people is a cocktail party, not a wedding. We've added a few of our business associates and some old family friends. It's only about 50 extra names. It's important for your father's business, and frankly, it's about presenting a united family front. 50 extra people. 50 strangers who would double the cost and shatter the intimacy we so desperately wanted. No, Mom, I said, my voice firm. We can't do that. We have a budget, and more importantly, we want to be surrounded by people who actually know and love us. You are being incredibly selfish and short-sighted, she snapped, her voice turning to ice. This isn't just about you. A wedding is a reflection on the entire family. Do you want people to think we couldn't afford to give our daughter a proper celebration? She hung up before I could respond. The next front in their war was my wedding dress. My mother insisted on accompanying me, turning what should have been a joyful experience into a series of subtle humiliations. I had always envisioned myself in something simple, elegant, and timeless. A-line, lace details, comfortable enough to dance in. At the first boutique, I found a dress that made me feel like myself. It was beautiful, understated, and within my budget. When I came out of the dressing room, my mother's face fell. "It's fine," she said, circling me like a hawk. "But it doesn't have any wow factor. It's plain, Alara. You need something more dramatic. Something that says, 'You're the sister of Mark Preston.'" She proceeded to pull a monstrosity off the rack, a massive ball gown dripping with rhinestones and priced at 5 times my budget. "Now this is a wedding dress," she declared. When I refused to even try it on, she sighed dramatically and whispered to the sales consultant, just loud enough for me to hear. She's always been so stubborn about accepting nice things. The final straw in this series of encroachments came a month before the wedding. I received a call from a cheerful woman named Brenda. "Hi, Alara," she chirped. "I'm just calling from the Crestwood Country Club to confirm your menu tasting for next Tuesday." I froze, the phone feeling cold against my ear. "I think you have the wrong person," I said slowly. "My wedding is at the old Maple Barn." "Oh," Brenda said, confused. "But your father, Richard, put down a significant deposit here for your wedding date just last week. He said you were having trouble with your other venue and that he was taking care of it." My blood ran cold. They had gone behind our backs and attempted to book a completely different venue, the very one my brother had used. I confronted my father that night, with Liam by my side for support. He was completely unrepentant. "I was trying to help you," he said, standing in his study with his arms crossed. "That barn is a liability. What if it rains? The country club is a safer, more respectable choice. I was fixing your mistake." "You didn't fix anything, Richard," Liam said, his voice dangerously calm. "You tried to bulldoze our decision. This is our wedding, and we will be getting married at the old Maple Barn." "You're making a huge mistake," my father boomed. "And you're letting this hobby of hers cloud your judgment." It was then that Liam and I decided we needed to have one final, definitive conversation. We invited them to our apartment for dinner, hoping that on our turf we could establish some boundaries. I cooked a simple, beautiful meal. We sat them down and calmly explained once again our vision for our wedding day. We told them that we loved them and wanted them to be a part of it, but that the major decisions had been made and we needed them to respect that. My mother began to cry. Not genuine tears of hurt, but the manipulative, watery tears she deployed whenever she was losing control. "I don't understand why you're being so cruel," she sobbed. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By embarrassing us in front of our friends with a hoedown wedding? What exactly have you done for me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The question hung in the air, sharp and uncomfortable. My father's face turned red. My mother's tears stopped instantly. "We gave you a roof over your head for 18 years, my father growled. "That's called parenting," Liam countered quietly. The conversation devolved from there, ending with them storming out, my mother calling me ungrateful. I was left shaking, not with anger, but with a profound sadness. They would never change. They would never see me. That night, I called my best friend and maid of honor, Chloe. I recounted the entire saga, from the guest list to the secret venue booking. I ended by saying, "Maybe I'm the one who's crazy, Chloe. Maybe I am being selfish." Chloe was silent for a moment, and then she said something that cut through all my self-doubt. "Alara, listen to me. They aren't trying to improve your wedding. They are trying to erase you from it. They want to turn your special day into a tribute to the life they wish you had. This isn't love. It's a hostile takeover. Don't you dare let them convince you that your feelings are invalid." Her words were a lifeline. She was right. It wasn't about a barn or a dress. It was about my entire identity, an identity I had fought so hard to build. I had managed to create a life and a love that was entirely my own, separate from their expectations, and now they were trying to drag it back into the shadow of my brother's success. I steeled my resolve. I would not let them win. I would have the wedding Liam and I dreamed of, even if it meant fighting my own family every step of the way. I just had no idea how dirty they were willing to play to get what they wanted. After the disastrous dinner at our apartment, a fragile, icy truce settled between us. My parents stopped their overt attempts to control the wedding, and I foolishly interpreted their silence as acceptance. They RSVP'd, yes. My mother even called to ask about the dress code, and I allowed a sliver of hope to grow. Maybe they had finally realized how much they were hurting me and had decided to support me, even if it was grudgingly. That hope was shattered on a Thursday evening, exactly 9 days before my wedding. I had just finished a grueling but exhilarating day. I had finalized the last details of my menu, sourced the most beautiful heirloom tomatoes from a local farm, and successfully negotiated with a vendor for vintage mismatched china that would complete my rustic elegant vision. I was buzzing with excitement, walking home with a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in weeks. The wedding was coming together. It was going to be beautiful. It was going to be ours. I walked into our apartment to find Liam sitting on the sofa, his posture rigid, his face pale. He was holding his phone, and he looked up at me with an expression of such disbelief and fury that my heart immediately started to pound. "What is it? What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my market bag on the floor. "I just got off the phone with Susan from the old maple barn," he said, his voice strained. She was calling to express her condolences that the wedding was off. The words didn't make sense. Off? What is she talking about? I just spoke to her yesterday about the final floor plan. Liam took a deep breath. "Your parents called her this morning, Alara. They told her that, due to a family tragedy, we were canceling the wedding. But since they had handled the finances from the beginning, they were invoking a clause in the contract to get their deposit back." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was a lie, of course. We had paid every deposit ourselves. They had no financial standing, no authority. But that wasn't the point. Susan thought something was fishy. Liam continued, his anger rising. "She said your mother was crying on the phone, talking about how devastated you were." Susan felt terrible, but the call seemed legitimate. She was about to process the cancellation and release the date when she decided to call me first, just to offer her personal sympathies. A cold, heavy dread pooled in my stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, vicious act of sabotage. They hadn't just disagreed with my choices. They had actively tried to destroy them. They had used the guise of a family tragedy, a lie so dark and twisted it made me physically ill, to try and take my wedding day away from me. But it got worse. While they were on the phone with Susan, Liam said, his jaw tight, they informed her that they had already made alternative arrangements for our guests. They hired another caterer and booked a function hall in the city. They were planning to call all our guests and redirect them to their wedding, the one they wanted all along. That was the moment something inside me broke. It was a clean, sharp snap, like a bone breaking under an unbearable weight. This wasn't about a venue anymore. This wasn't about a guest list or a dress. This was about possession. They believed they owned me, that they owned my life, and that they had the right to demolish any part of it that didn't please them. They had tried to take away the single most important day of my life, the day I would marry the man I loved. And they had tried to steal my voice, my art, the one thing that was unequivocally mine, the food. By canceling my contract and hiring their own caterer, They were sending the clearest possible message. Your passion is worthless. Your talent is irrelevant. Your identity as a chef is nothing compared to our desire for social standing. I looked at Liam, and he must have seen the shift in my eyes, the moment the hurt and sadness were burned away by a cold, clarifying rage. For years, I had absorbed their disapproval, their condescension, their casual cruelty. I had made excuses for them. I had tried to win their love through my actions, my achievements, my food. I had tried to be a good daughter, even when they were not good parents. No more. "Call Susan back," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Tell her the wedding is absolutely on. Tell her my parents have no authority and to disregard everything they said. And tell her to expect a call from our new co-host." Liam looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face as he recognized the steel in my voice. "Co-host?" "Oh, yes," I said, picking up my own phone. "My parents wanted a wedding that would impress their friends. I'm about to give them one they will never, ever forget." In that moment, I wasn't just a bride fighting for her wedding. I was a chef defending her kitchen. They had brought the fire, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. I had spent my entire adult life learning how to stand the heat, and I was about to turn it up higher than they could ever imagine. They thought they had pushed me to my breaking point. They were right, but they had no idea what I was capable of building from the pieces. My parents' fatal miscalculation was their belief that I was still the same girl who had timidly asked for a culinary school loan years ago. They saw me as a line cook with a dream, isolated and dependent on their good graces. They had no idea that for the past 3 months, I had been living a double life. Remember my wistful dream of having Chef Julian Vance cater my wedding? It wasn't just a fantasy. 6 months prior, on a whim, fueled by a frustrating conversation with my father, I had poured all my hopes and frustrations into an application for the Vance Culinary Vanguard competition. It was a prestigious national contest for up-and-coming chefs. The grand prize wasn't money. It was something far more valuable. A 3-month, one-on-one mentorship with the legend himself. I submitted a portfolio of my original recipes, an essay about my culinary philosophy, and a video of me preparing my signature dish, a pan-seared scallop with a saffron risotto and a basil-infused oil. I never told anyone, especially not my parents. I couldn't bear the thought of their dismissive smirks or lectures about wasting my time. I sent the application into the void and promptly tried to forget about it. Then, 3 months ago, I got the call. I had won. For 12 weeks, I had been secretly meeting with Julian Vance every Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't the intimidating celebrity I had seen on television. He was a kind, intense, brilliant mentor who saw the potential in me that my own family had refused to acknowledge. He tasted my food, critiqued my technique, and pushed me to refine my vision. He listened to my stories about my family, shaking his head with a knowing sadness. "The food world is full of critics, Alara," he told me one afternoon. "But the cruelest are often the ones who are supposed to love you. Don't ever let them dull your blade." He had become more than a mentor. He had become a believer. So, when I stood in my apartment, reeling from my parents' act of sabotage, my first call was not to a lawyer, but to him. I dialed his private number, my hands shaking. His assistant put me through immediately. "Julian," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm in trouble." I explained everything, the years of dismissiveness, the attempts to control my wedding, and the final, brutal act of calling the venue to cancel my entire day under the guise of a family tragedy. I told him how they had tried to erase my menu, the heart and soul of my celebration. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a terrifying second, I thought I had overstepped, that this was too personal, too messy. Then he spoke, and his voice was like forged steel. "They did what?" he asked, a quiet fury in his tone. That is not just insulting, Alara. That is a declaration of war against your spirit. We are not going to let that happen. My breath hitched with relief. Here's what we are going to do, he continued, his mind already working strategically. First, you and Liam will secure your venue. Get confirmation in writing that your contract is reinstated, and that your parents have been officially removed as contacts. Second, you are going to let them believe their little plan has worked. Do not confront them. Let them walk blindly into the consequences of their actions. What consequences? I asked. I could almost hear him smile through the phone. My dear, they tried to take away your food. So, we are going to give them a culinary experience they will never forget. I am no longer just your mentor. As of this moment, Vance Culinary is the official sponsor of your wedding. I gasped. Julian, I can't let you do that. That's too much. Nonsense, he said firmly. This is what we do. We support our own. My team and I will be there. We will work with your friends, under your direction, to execute your menu flawlessly. We will cover the cost of every ingredient, every server, every glass of champagne. This will not be a home-catered meal anymore. This will be an officially sponsored Alara by Vance event. And we are going to announce it. Very, very publicly. A plan began to form, more brilliant and devastatingly effective than anything I could have concocted on my own. It was a chef's revenge, served with style and precision. Liam immediately got on the phone with Susan at the venue. He explained the situation, and she was utterly appalled. She sent over a revised contract within the hour, explicitly stating that only Liam and I had the authority to make changes. She even offered a discount on the bar package as an apology for the distress, and eagerly agreed to keep our secret. Next, I called Chloe and my other friends from the culinary world who had offered to help. When I told them the news, that they would now be working alongside Chef Julian Vance's team, there was a collective shriek of excitement. My small army of loyal friends had just been given elite reinforcements. We spent the next week in a whirlwind of secret preparations. Julian's team was incredible. They sourced ingredients I had only dreamed of working with, refined my plating designs, and handled logistics with an efficiency that left me in awe. All the while, I maintained radio silence with my parents. They sent a few smug, condescending texts. Hope you're feeling better about things. We've arranged a lovely tasting for you with the new caterer on Wednesday, my mother wrote. I replied with a simple, okay. I let them think I had capitulated, that I was a defeated daughter being led meekly to the slaughter. They had no idea. They were the ones marching toward the chopping block. The stage was set, not for a family screaming match, but for a meticulously planned piece of culinary theater. And the main performance was scheduled for the rehearsal dinner, a venue of their own choosing, where they intended to toast to their victory in front of everyone. My parents, in their infinite arrogance, had insisted on hosting the rehearsal dinner. They chose the Gilded Spoon, the stuffy, old-world restaurant run by the very catering company they had hired to replace me. The guest list was a curated collection of their most important friends and business associates, the people whose opinions they valued more than their own daughter's happiness. The entire evening was designed as a victory lap, a public demonstration of how they had saved my wedding from my own poor taste. Liam and I walked in, playing our parts perfectly. I wore a simple white dress, my face a mask of quiet resignation. They greeted us at the door, my mother patting my arm with a look of pity, my father clapping Liam on the back as if they were co-conspirators. See? My mother whispered to me. Isn't this so much better than that drafty barn? We sat through the clinking of glasses and the stilted small talk. The food was exactly what I expected. Technically competent, but utterly soulless. It was the kind of food designed to offend no one, and as a result, excite no one. It was my parents on a plate. About an hour into the meal, my father stood, tapping his glass for attention. A hush fell over the room. "Good evening, everyone," he began, beaming. "Helen and I are so thrilled you could join us to celebrate Alara and Liam. As parents, you always want what's best for your children. Sometimes that means guiding them, even when they're a bit headstrong." A few of his friends chuckled knowingly. "It takes a village, as they say." We had to make some difficult decisions to ensure this wedding would be an event befitting of our two families. "We are just so pleased with the elegant direction things are now heading." He raised his glass. "To family and to making the right choices." As the polite applause died down, I gave Liam a small nod. He squeezed my hand under the table. This was it. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. But my voice, when it came, was clear and steady. "Thank you, Dad, for those words. Liam and I are so grateful for everyone being here." I paused, letting the room settle, my eyes scanning the faces of my parents' friends. And on that note, I would also like to take a moment to thank our actual wedding caterer and sponsor, who has so graciously joined us this evening. A confused murmur rippled through the room. My parents exchanged a bewildered glance. On the far side of the restaurant, at a table that had been quietly observing the proceedings, a man stood up. He was tall, distinguished, with a familiar, charismatic presence. It was Chef Julian Vance. The room went completely, utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. Jaws literally dropped. I saw my father's face drain of all color, his confident smirk frozen and then crumbling into a mask of pure shock. My mother looked as if she had seen a ghost. Julian walked calmly to the front of the room, a warm, commanding smile on his face. "Good evening," he said, his voice filling the space. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julian Vance." The whispers erupted. "Is that really him? What is he doing here?" Julian let the buzz build for a moment before continuing. "I'm here tonight not just as a guest, but as Alara's mentor. For the past 3 months, I've had the distinct pleasure of working with her after she won my company's National Vanguard competition. She is, without a doubt, one of the most gifted young chefs I have ever encountered." He turned his gaze towards me, and it was full of genuine pride. Then he turned back to the room, his expression hardening slightly. "A chef's wedding menu is the most personal expression of their art," he said, his voice dropping a little, drawing everyone in. "It's a gift to their loved ones. So you can imagine my profound disappointment when I learned that Alara's own family had attempted to sabotage that gift. When I heard they had called her venue under false pretenses and tried to cancel the single most important element of her celebration." He let that sink in. The guests were no longer looking at him. They were looking at my parents, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Talent like Alara's must be protected and nurtured, not stifled," Julian declared, his voice rising with passion. "So, my company, Vance Culinary, has made a decision. We are proud to officially sponsor Alara and Liam's wedding. My executive team and I will be working under Chef Alara's direction to bring her beautiful, personal menu to life. Every cost will be covered. It will be a celebration of a brilliant new voice in the culinary world." The humiliation on my parents' faces was absolute. They were trapped, exposed in front of the very people they had tried so hard to impress. Their friends, their business partners, were all staring at them, the story now crystal clear. They had tried to crush their daughter's dream, and in doing so, had revealed their own pettiness and cruelty. I picked up my champagne flute. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound power. I looked directly at my parents, whose faces were ashen. "This wedding will be a celebration of love, integrity, and passion. It will be exactly as Liam and I envisioned it, on our terms." I raised my glass higher. "To staying true to yourself." Liam stood beside me, his arm firm around my waist. We clinked our glasses together. The sound echoed in the silent, stunned room. We didn't wait for another toast. We simply turned, and with our heads held high, we walked out of the restaurant, leaving my parents to drown in the deafening silence of their public disgrace. The war was over. We had won. And the taste of victory was sweeter than anything the gilded spoon could ever hope to serve. Walking out of that restaurant was like stepping out of a pressure cooker. The air outside felt crisp and clean, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could take a full, deep breath. Liam and I didn't say much on the drive home. We just held hands, a silent, powerful understanding passing between us. We had faced the dragon and won. The next 9 days were a joyous, chaotic blur. My phone was inundated with texts and calls. A few were from my parents, panicked, then angry, then pleading voicemails which I ignored. The majority, however, were from guests who had been at the rehearsal dinner, expressing their shock and their unwavering support for us. It turned out my parents' friends weren't as loyal to their narrative as they had believed. The wedding day was everything we had dreamed of, and more. The old maple barn was transformed. Fairy lights and wildflowers adorned the rustic beams, and the long wooden tables were set with the vintage china I had so carefully chosen. The air smelled of wood smoke, roasting rosemary, and happiness. Chef Julian Vance was there, not as a celebrity chef, but as a guest and a proud mentor. He stood in the background, beaming, as my friends and his team worked in perfect harmony, bringing my menu to life. My parents did not come. My brother, Mark, sent a single curt text message that morning. "This is a new low, Alara." I read it, deleted it, and didn't give it another thought. Their absence was a gaping hole where a family was supposed to be, but instead of feeling like a wound, it felt like a clean, open space. It was sad, but it was also a relief. For one perfect day, I was surrounded only by people who loved and celebrated me for exactly who I was. The food was a triumph. We served family-style platters of my pan-seared scallops, slow-braised short ribs with a red wine reduction, and a harvest tart filled with roasted vegetables and goat cheese. It was honest, heartfelt food, and our guests raved about it. Seeing people I loved savoring the food I had created was a feeling more validating than any award. The week after we returned from our honeymoon in Italy, Julian called me into his office. He offered me a position I thought was still years away in my future. Head of recipe development for his new, highly anticipated line of gourmet bistro meals. It was a dream job, a role that would allow me to be creative, to innovate, and to have my work reach a national audience. The salary was more than double what I had been making as a line cook. With my new income, Liam and I were able to move out of our small apartment and into a beautiful 2-bedroom condo with a chef's kitchen and a balcony perfect for growing herbs. It was our space, a home we built together, funded by our mutual success and support for one another. We heard whispers about my parents through the family grapevine. The fallout from the rehearsal dinner had been swift and brutal. In their social circle, where reputation is everything, the story of them trying to sabotage their own daughter's wedding had spread like wildfire. They were not seen as powerful figures who had saved the day. They were seen as petty, controlling, and cruel. They had become social pariahs, their invitations to galas and dinner parties mysteriously drying up. My father's business, which relied heavily on networking and personal relationships, reportedly took a hit. They had tried to curate a perfect public image, and with one grand public gesture, Julian and I had shattered it, revealing the ugly truth underneath. They were isolated, embarrassed, and for the first time in their lives, they were facing social consequences they couldn't buy their way out of. I felt a strange detachment from it all. It wasn't triumph or glee. It was a quiet, somber sense of justice. They had built their house of cards on a foundation of control and image, and now it was collapsing. Liam and I, meanwhile, were building our life on a foundation of something much stronger: authenticity, respect, and a shared passion. I had my dream job, my dream husband, and a future that felt as limitless as an open sky. But a small part of me still wondered if the family I was born into could ever be rebuilt from the ashes. 2 years to the day after our wedding, Liam and I stood on the dusty, unfinished floor of what would soon be my first restaurant. The sign, still wrapped in plastic, was propped against a wall. It read, "Alara's Table." The bistro meal line I developed for Julian had become a runaway success. He had stayed true to his word, and 6 months ago, he had approached me with a partnership proposal. He would provide the backing and the business mentorship. I would provide the culinary vision. It was the culmination of every late night, every burn, every sacrifice. My dream, once a distant star, was now a tangible reality I could touch and build. Our life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. Liam's architectural firm had landed a major contract to design a new community arts center, and he was thriving. Our home was filled with the easy laughter and comfortable silence of a partnership built on solid ground. My relationship with my parents had undergone a slow, seismic shift. 2 months after the wedding, a long, handwritten letter arrived. It was from my mother. In it, she didn't make excuses or try to justify their actions. For the first time, she simply apologized. She wrote about the shame and isolation they had felt, and how that had forced them to finally look at their own behavior. She admitted their deep-seated favoritism for Mark and how their own unfulfilled ambitions had been unfairly projected onto us. It was raw, painful, and honest. My father called a week later. His apology was more awkward, more gruff, but no less sincere. He told me he was proud of me, words I had waited my entire life to hear. He admitted that he had never understood my world, and so he had feared it, and had tried to force it into a shape he recognized. We started slowly, a hesitant coffee, a quiet dinner. It was like getting to know strangers. We began seeing a family therapist together, a neutral ground where we could unpack decades of dysfunctional dynamics. The old power structure was gone. I was no longer the daughter desperately seeking their approval. I was a successful woman, a wife, a business owner, and I was meeting them on my terms. The boundaries were clear and non-negotiable. Our relationship would be built on respect, or it wouldn't be built at all. The most profound change, however, was in my brother, Mark. The golden child's gilded life had begun to tarnish. His law firm, facing an economic downturn, had undergone a round of layoffs. To everyone's shock, Mark, the senior associate they were so proud of, was one of those let go. His arrogance and sense of entitlement, which had served him well under our parents' protection, made him a difficult colleague and, ultimately, expendable. He struggled to find a new position. The legal world was smaller than he thought, and his reputation as being difficult preceded him. For the first time in his life, he was facing failure, and he didn't have the resilience to handle it. He had to move back in with our parents, his perfect life crumbling around him. He saw me at a family dinner, the first one we'd all had in over a year. I was there to discuss the architectural plans for my new restaurant with Liam. Mark sat silently, watching me with a new, unsettling expression. It wasn't anger anymore. It looked a lot like envy. The hobby he had once scorned was now a thriving business, while his legacy was a pile of rejection letters. The universe, it seemed, had its own way of balancing the books. One evening, my father came to the restaurant site to see the progress. He walked through the space, looking at the exposed brick and the plans for the open kitchen. "You know," he said quietly, "your mother and I, we thought success was a straight line. The one Mark was on. We never realized it could look like this." He gestured around the chaotic, promising space. "This beautiful, creative thing you're building from nothing. You were the strong one all along, Alara. We just weren't smart enough to see it." It wasn't a perfect ending. The scars of the past were still there. But it was a real beginning. A chance to build a new kind of family, one where worth wasn't measured by a salary or a title, but by the passion in your heart and the integrity with which you live your life. Building a new relationship with my parents would be a long, deliberate process, much like creating a complex sauce. But for the first time, it felt like we finally had the right ingredients. Standing here today, in the heart of my own restaurant, surrounded by the busy clatter of a working kitchen and the happy chatter of diners, I often think back on the journey that brought me here. The pain of my family's betrayal was immense, a wound so deep I thought it might never heal. But now, looking back, I see that wound for what it truly was, a breaking point that was also a breakthrough. It was the violent, necessary crack in the foundation of my old life. A crack that forced me to build a new one. Stronger, more authentic, and more beautiful than anything I could have ever dreamed. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about food or about business. It was about worth. For years, I had unconsciously allowed my value to be determined by others, specifically by parents who could only measure success in terms they understood: money, status, conventional security. I was starving for their approval, trying to earn a seat at a table where, in truth, I was never truly welcome. Their attempt to sabotage my wedding was the final, brutal proof that my seat was never going to be given to me. I had to build my own table. And that's the truth at the heart of my story. It's a truth not just for me, but, I believe, for anyone who has ever felt small in their own story. Your passion is not a hobby. Your dream is not an inconvenience. It is the very essence of who you are. And it is valid and worthy, whether or not the people around you have the vision to see it. Seeking validation from those who are unable or unwilling to give it is like trying to grow a garden on concrete. You will exhaust yourself in the trying, and eventually, you will start to believe the fault lies with the seeds, not with the barren ground. For years, I believed something was wrong with my seeds. I lived with an invisible ghost on my shoulder, the ghost of my parents' expectations. It was a low-grade hum of pressure, a constant background anxiety that I was letting them down. I would rehearse conversations in my head before calling them, trying to frame my small accomplishments in a way they might understand or respect. I made myself smaller at family gatherings, letting my brother's spotlight shine brighter, hoping that being small would keep me safe from their criticism. But the thing is, when you make yourself smaller, you don't become safer. You simply begin to disappear. The day they tried to cancel my wedding, they weren't just attacking my plans, they were attacking my very existence. They were saying, non-verbally, that the version of me that was Alara the chef was unacceptable and had to be erased and replaced with a more socially palatable version. And the moment I understood that, everything shifted. The shift didn't begin with the public showdown at the restaurant. It began in the quiet of my apartment, with Liam by my side. In the instant I decided that their approval no longer mattered more than my own self-respect. The real victory wasn't their public humiliation or the sponsorship from Julian Vance. That was just the outcome. The real victory was the internal decision. The moment you stop asking for permission to live your own life. It was when I picked up the phone, not to plead my case, but to place a bet on my own talent, on my own vision. And this brings me to a redefinition of family. I used to believe that family was an unbreakable bond, a blood tie you had to accept unconditionally. But I've learned that blind loyalty isn't a virtue. Sometimes it's a form of self-erasure. True family, the family you choose, and the family that chooses you back, are not the people who try to box you in. They are the people who hand you a hammer and help you knock down the walls. They are the ones who fan your flames, not the ones who try to blow them out. In my darkest moments, Julian, Liam, and my friends, they became my true family. They didn't just see my light, they reflected it back at me when I had forgotten how to shine. They reminded me I wasn't just a line cook, I was an artist. And that is a profound difference. One is tolerance, the other is celebration. True family celebrates you. Rebuilding a relationship with my parents has been one of the hardest things I've ever done. It has required patience, boundaries as solid as steel, and the painful acceptance that our relationship will never be what I dreamed of as a little girl. It won't be one of unconditional acceptance. It will be a relationship built on a newfound respect, a respect I had to force them to have by walking away and succeeding on my own terms. My brother Mark's story is a tragic reminder of what happens when a person's worth is entirely outsourced to external factors. He was a skyscraper built on a weak foundation, and when the economy shook, he crumbled. My success was not about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And maybe that's the most crucial lesson of all. There is a huge difference between proving them wrong and proving yourself right. Proving them wrong is a reactive act, fueled by anger and bitterness. It keeps you tethered to their narrative, still letting them control your emotional state. But proving yourself right is a creative act. It's fueled by a belief in yourself. It releases you from their story and allows you to write your own. Don't waste your precious energy trying to change the minds of people who have already decided not to understand you. Instead, invest that energy into building a life so beautiful that their opinion becomes utterly and completely irrelevant. Maybe right now, you're standing in your own kitchen, looking at the ingredients life has given you. Maybe some people are telling you those ingredients aren't good enough, that you should follow a different recipe, a safer, more predictable one. Maybe the voices of your doubters are echoing in your head, louder than the voice of your own intuition. I know that feeling. I know the fear of straying from the pre-approved path. But I'm here to tell you that your ingredients are enough. Your intuition is the recipe. My journey has taught me that the magic isn't in having the perfect ingredients. It's in having the courage to combine them in your own unique way, trusting the process even when you're not sure of the final outcome. So, I want to ask all of you, what's your story? What is the table that you are building for yourself, against the expectations of others? What is the dream you're quietly nurturing, the one others might call small or unrealistic? And most importantly, who are the flame fanners in your life? Take a moment to honor them, whether it's in your mind or publicly, because they are the true architects of our confidence. I would love to read your stories in the comments below. Your journey could be the inspiration someone else needs to see today. In the comments, we're not just viewers, we're a community of table builders, of recipe writers. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength and your own fire, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more stories of overcoming and empowerment, and share it. Share it with a friend who might be dimming their own light to make others comfortable. Sometimes, all we need is a reminder that we are allowed, and indeed encouraged, to shine as brightly as we can. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, your life is your kitchen. You are the executive chef. Don't ever, ever let anyone else write your menu.